Power does what it wants. Power does what it wants. Power does what it wants.
You hear that, folks? There are two sets of laws. One for the police and one for the ordinary citizen.
Find a seat. You can sit. Just remember, there's tons of social time afterward. You can stay here until they close the place out. We'll get George out. He's got a 3-hour drive. I'm going to save announcements and other things, policy announcements and other things until after George is done. So we're going to let George talk, and then we're going to have Q&A as usual, and a little discussion on what happened, and we'll make any announcements, or anyone that's not any other announcements can make them as well. I think. George is, has anyone heard of a First Amendment auditor? It's just like it sounds. They audit the First Amendment. Okay. They go around and test our public officials as to whether they're actually following the First Amendment or not. It's relatively risky. They get arrested. Have you been assaulted? Assaulted, arrested, you name it, and they take a lot of risk for us. It's not a big money maker or anything like that. It's not retention, at least not George's. He's just a servant, he's serving us. He's a true public servant. But he's come all the way down here to speak to us about First Amendment auditing and some other things. And I'm going to give the mic over to George Metz, a.k.a. Rogue Nation.
Thanks, folks. I want to thank everybody, first of all, Dave, for having me down here. And what he was saying is exactly what it is. I am a First Amendment auditor. I've been in the government transparency for about 4 years now. And I came upon the topic through a boys' prison here in Florida that was called Dozier School for Boys. And it was up in Mariana, which is up in the panhandle of Florida. And it was a boys' prison for about 100 years. And over some time, 80 young men were raped and murdered there by state employees. This was a secure facility that boys were sent to as punishment for breaking the law. It can be considered a prison for juveniles. And like I said, over time, 80 young men were killed and raped there. And this was a facility that was also overseen by other state employees, right? Because you've got the facility, it's got the guards, and then you have people from the state that come in to check to make sure the facility is running correctly. That's the checks and balances that we were supposed to have. So it goes beyond saying how these 80 boys vanished and no one raised the red flag. It just mystified me, right? And it mystified me even more that no one was ever prosecuted for these crimes. Okay, so you're talking on a scale of one of the worst serial killings in American history. And no one was ever prosecuted for it. So when I saw that, the only logical conclusion that I could come to was that the state didn't have enough people to watch over its operations, right? How else could 80 young boys go missing in a secure facility, right? So you can't put a butterfly into a jar and have it escape and not wonder where it went, right? The lid's on. Where did it go? Well, the same thing with these young boys. So that's what got me started going around and looking into what the government was doing. And while I was doing that, I was taking my camera around with me, wherever that is back there now. I was taking my camera around with me, and what I found was that government hated me. Yes. Government hated me coming around and asking them what they were doing. All right? They hated the fact that I was recording them. Even though in the buildings that I go to, there's 55 million cameras all pointed at me, they hated it when I turned that camera back and looked at them and asked them questions. And, from there, it's just been a journey. Everything I've ever heard and thought was wrong with government, I found out was true. It was true. There is election fraud in small towns here in the South. There is racism alive down here in the South. There is housing discrimination. There's good old boy systems where the families have lived in the county for 100 years, and they've got streets named after them, and they can pretty much do no wrong. And when I was at one of these counties, and we were up there protesting a sheriff up there, I had a chance to talk to a young man that lived in that area. And he told me, he says, yeah, it's great. I know the sheriff. I don't have any problems. And he didn't understand how the other people that lived in the county and didn't know the sheriff, how that affected them, right? Because he's buddies with the sheriff. He can go home drunk and not get pulled over, because the deputies all know him. But to some people that just moved into the county, or some people that haven't lived there their whole life, trouble, bequeathed them, would overrun them, because they don't have those connections. So it's kind of uneven. So what I started out to do was just, when I started out, I just wanted to, I have 2 little girls, 10 and 15. We homeschool them. We've always homeschooled them. I never understood the idea of getting my children to the state to educate them, right? Especially when you see the work product the state puts out. I'm not saying that to be disrespectful to anybody, but I went through public school. I saw the work product that the state put out. I wasn't happy with it, So we've always homeschooled our kids. And when I started, I said, I just want my girls to understand their rights better. I want them to understand their place better. And one of the ways we understand our place better in the scheme of things is by learning the law, right? Because I equate the law to Dad's rules, right? And when you live in Dad's house, you better obey Dad's rules, right? That's the way it is. It's the law. And the law of the United States and the law of the state and municipality, those are the rules that we have to live by here in Dad's house. So I started studying law as a hobby 10 years ago. I'm kind of blessed. I've been reading about 400 to 500 pages a day for about 30 years. I can read exceptionally well, and I have a high retention rate. So when I started reading law, I was able to pick up a lot of it. I was able to read through a lot of it, retain a lot of it, and that helped me out immensely once I started picking up the camera. Because what I've noticed is that a lot of the people that are put in charge of us, be it a city council member, a mayor, a police officer, the FBI, a lot of these people don't know the law, right? And the Supreme Court has even said that citizens give up their rights a lot of the time simply because they don't know them, right? And they're unsure, right? And so when someone in authority comes up to us and says, hey, you have to do this or you have to do that, because we don't know, we succumb to that and say, you know what? This guy's in authority, he probably knows what's right, so I'm just going to do what he says. And that's how a lot of times we end up giving up our rights. This young man shaking his head no. And that's how I am now today. But 10 years ago, I was, somebody, hey, you got ID, sir? Oh, yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir, please. I didn't do anything. Please. Don't take me to jail. I got a family. I got people I got to support. Here it is. Whatever you got to do. But now I question, I say, well, what do you need this for? What authority are you exerting over me, right? Because when it comes down to it, we're all men and women, right? And none of us have superpowers, right? Nobody here? No superpower? We got one guy with superpower. Yeah, two. So most of us are men and women. We don't have superpowers. We don't have no authority over other men and women, right? So to me, my questioning was, what gave 10 people this authority over me that one person or each person separately did not have? And that started my journey into law and into freedom. And what I found was, and this is definitely, there's two things that I found that the government does not want us to talk about, does not want us to understand. One is jury nullification, right? Jury nullification is one of the ways that the American citizen can void laws that it finds distasteful to the population, right? And they hate it when you talk about it. I have a buddy who's been trespassed from a county courthouse all across the state because he would stand out in front of the courthouse with his jury nullification brochures and pass them out to people as they were walking in the court. And the court don't want to know, don't want you to know that you guys have the power to void laws, right? Because then, you'd be working against them, right? Well, the same thing with the free press. The free press was given to us as an individual right. It wasn't given to us just for CNN. Wasn't given to us for the New York Times. It was given to us as an individual right because the founders realized that over time anybody can be corrupted, right? New York Times can be corrupted. CNN can be corrupted. Everybody can be corrupted. But you know yourself, right? So if you're going out there and you're getting that information and you're doing that story yourself, you're going to realize what's true and what's not. You're going to realize that this guy's not going to be able to buy you off, and you're going to release the story, right? And I've done lots of stories, not just my auditing, which is something separate, but because of my auditing, because people see that I come out to the government, I question them, okay, then they call me up, then they email me, okay, because one of the biggest problems that our public officials face today is there's nowhere to turn to, right? So, for example, there was an auditor, a city auditor down in, I believe it was in Miami, and he had found some discrepancies in the financials. And he takes it to the chief, and the chief tells him, no, it's okay, and just leave it alone, and we'll take care of it, we got it. Now, this guy's faced with a circumstance here. He can either try to take that higher and end up losing his job, right? Or he can just let it go, like the chief said, and continue paying his mortgage and feeding his children, right? And so most of the time, that's exactly what they're going to do. So when I come on to the scene and they see me, well, then they email me anonymously. And they say, you know what, George? I saw you were here last week. Here's what's really going on in this location. Here's what people are really doing that you're not going to be able to see from just coming in and asking a little bit of questions. And I got to tell you, I've been wildly successful at having these people contact me with all kinds of information. I took care of a cop that was fired from his last department because he had child porn on his computer. All right? And what he did was just, they didn't prosecute him. Okay? They just let him go. So, and this is in Alabama. And in Alabama, they have a problem with what's known as gypsy cops. They'll get fired from one department, they'll move to another department, right? So, this gentleman contacted me. He's a third-generation state trooper, okay? His father, his grandfather, and him were all state troopers. He moves back to his hometown. In his hometown, he finds this cop, okay? Now, this cop has been on the force at his hometown for like 20 years, after he'd already been let go for the child porn, okay? So he sends me an email. He says, George, please come up here. Please look into this. Please ask some questions. So I go up there, and I go to the sheriff's office, and I go to the chief of police, and I said, and because I got the evidence, right? I got the evidence. This guy had child porn on his computer. He was like, oh, here's his old chief's signature saying that. And I tell the chief, I said, Chief, I said, why do you have this guy working for you? Oh, that was before I was hired. He was hired before I was. All right? It doesn't bother you that a pillar of your community has been busted with child porn? Like, I don't know, if I came onto a job like that, I would look to see what my coworkers were involved with, at least, you know? He didn't want to have nothing to do with it. Went to the sheriff's department. Oh, that's none of our problem. I said, well, listen, I just want to let you know, I want you guys to keep an eye on this guy, you know, make sure he's not hanging out around the school, making sure he's not appointed as a school resource officer, right? And then after I left, the gentleman emailed me. He said, you know what, I don't know what you said. He said, but that cop's gone, the chief's retiring, and another cop that was involved is retiring also. So, you know, these people need an outlet to tell people to, you know? And as far as the right to free press, when our founders were envisioning the country, the Continental Congress wrote a letter to the inhabitants of Quebec, and they were telling them about the wonders of our rights. And this was in 1774. It was 2 years before the Declaration of Independence that they wrote this letter to the inhabitants of Quebec. You can look it up online, read it yourself. And what they said about the right to free press was that it is our right to shame our public officials into doing what is noble. Right? And if you remember correctly, back then, they used to shame the public officials. That's where tarred and feathered came from, right? Because when you went against the will of the people, you got called out. You were tarred and you were feathered. You were an outcast now because you went against the will of the people. And we have so far gone past that now to where we don't even question our officials anymore, right? Because, oh, there's an agency inside the agency of the agency that's overlooking the agency, right? Right? We don't need anybody to investigate the cops because they have the IA, right? To me, that's akin to saying, we don't need to look after the mafia. They have an internal system inside the mafia that makes sure that their hitmen are only killing between the hours of 8 and 5, right? And only people that deserve it. So we don't need to look after those guys, right? They've got their own internal system. But I believe not only is it our right, it's our responsibility to look after these people. What are they doing, right? Because whatever they're doing, they're using our money, right? They're using our money to do it. They're using our money to drive around. They're using our money to plan. They're using our money for everything, right? But even worse than that, they're using our name, right? Because everything they do is done in our name, right? So every injustice, every travesty, every Dozier School for Boys, that's done in our name, right? We're allowing that to happen because we're busy, right? We have busy lives. We got work, we got kids, soccer practice, I take my girls roller skating, Girl Scouts. We have busy lives, and that's exactly the way they want to keep us, right? 556 channels on your TV, so you don't end up at City Hall asking, you know, why this or why that. It's just, it amazes me the lack of transparency that we have going on. And people are celebrating it, right? People are celebrating it. You know, and what I do when I do this, there's lots of people that love what I do. But there's lots of people that hate what I do, right? There's lots of people that think that we should never, ever question authorities. That we should just, you know, let them do whatever they want to do and let, you know, this decide and that decide. And we have a system, and we have a good system, but it only stays good when we're vigilant, right? It only stays good when we're watching, because just like a criminal, You're not watching a criminal. They're going to do criminal stuff. You know, if you leave the door open and the cash on the counter, they're going to come in and they're going to take it. And guess what? If you don't do nothing about it, next week, they're going to do the same thing. You know, they're going to keep doing it. And the politicians and the government are no different. They're absolutely no different. So if the county here in Charlotte, if they do a building project and they get kickbacks from the developers and no one exposes that, well, hell, there's another developer next week. He's going to build a condo. You know, we get a kickback from that. And I've been working on a story up in Walton County. If you folks know where Walton County is, up in the Panhandle.
I just moved from there.
Okay, Destin, the resort of Destin. My buddy estimates it to be $500 million worth of fraud up there, okay? And what's going on up there is they're letting the developers develop, you know, homes and high-rises and all this stuff, and they're not holding them to the standards of the state, right? Specifically in like drainage ditches and traffic roadways and stuff. And she can attest, driving through Destin. Yeah, it is insane. All right, so they're supposed to, and I'm no surveyor or anybody that does that, but from what I understand of the case, it's supposed to be 6 to 7 inches rain retention, and they're doing like 2 inches. So all the runoff, all the pesticides, all the herbicides, all the stuff people are putting on their lawns and stuff like that is running right into the bay, right? Because they're not having that retention. So, I mean, they're literally killing, you know, the bay. They're killing people's property value, you know, because you bought there 20 years ago, there was no traffic, and then they built up to where another 200,000 people could live there, but they're still only that one road, you know, and now your property values are down. Now you have to, you know, take a 45-minute drive, half of a block, to get a loaf of bread. You know, and it looks no different than, you know, Miami or you know, Boynton Beach or any of those places where you literally have to take a half an hour just to go down the block to the store.
It's
You know?
It's not just southern part of town, it's going to mid.
No, oh, that's
I'm being sarcastic.
oh yeah, but it's true. You'll find it in all places of the city because we keep growing. And so a lot of places are going to have that development fraud. Are you guys familiar with the villages? Okay, I live up by the villages. I mean, I'm at their back door pretty much, and they take up about 3 counties. And we had, last year, I had a county council wife call a buddy of mine, and she said that her husband and another gentleman had got elected to the county council to try to fight what was going on, right? Well, it just so happened that those 2 gentlemen were indicted because they were talking on the phone to each other about what was going on in the county. See, because what happens is when you don't get in the pocket, they find a way to get you out, right? So if you got 3 or 4 guys on the council already voting one way, which is what we have up in Walton County, they've got, I think, one new lady who's a new council member up there.
Donna, I got her.
Donna, yep. Yep. So now we got Donna up there, but she's fighting a losing battle. And this ain't just in Florida. I was up in Easley, South Carolina, same thing. The lady up there called me, she's a city council member. Every other city council member, the mayors are all in each other's pockets, right? She's the only one up there. Well, you can watch the city council meeting. She's the only one voting against these things. They're just giving money away, you know? And it's going to be like that. It's going to continue to be like that until we, you know, ask questions, until we dig into things, until we look at the contracts that these guys are signing. Any of you ever heard of an earthquake here in Florida? Anybody? Earthquake in Florida? No? My new police department, down by where I live, an extra $500,000 to make it earthquake proof. To make it earthquake proof. I'm not joking. An extra $500,000 to make the new police department earthquake proof. Okay? Not sinkhole proof, which would make sense, right? Especially in Central Florida, right? Not earthquake proof. All right, so I'm wondering, whose cousin that company was that got that bid for doing that. But again, they keep getting away with this stuff, but never ever going to stop, right? So it behooves us all to, whenever we interact with our government officials, to ask questions, make sure we record it, make sure everything is up and out in the open, right? Because otherwise they can lie. And unfortunately, I don't know if any of you had to deal with the court system against the state, but the court system always sides with the state, okay? Whether it be the police officer, whether it be a city council member, it's just the way it is. In law, they call it a presumption, okay? And they presume that the people that are working for the government are going to be truthful. That's what they presume, right? That these guys wouldn't lie, that they're telling the truth, that they're all upholding truth and justice, right? Yeah, it's like assume. Yeah, but it's called presume. Yeah, they work on presumptions. So we always got to have evidence. We've always got to have a way to combat whatever it is they're saying, because quite literally they'll say anything and everything they can. And I've heard it all, like Dave was telling you earlier. I've been arrested 4 times for just simply recording, just walking into a public building where the public's allowed and having my video camera going, right? Because as soon as they see me, they get all antsy. Well, what are you doing here? Well, who are you? Well, that's none of your business. I'm a free American. I'm allowed to do this. Go about your day. Oh, no, I can't handle that. I'm going to call the police now, have you arrested or have you escorted off the property. Well, I've done nothing wrong. Why would you call the police? Well, you're very suspicious. You have a camera, you're recording, you're not telling me why. You're very suspicious. Okay. But I'm not doing anything. Well, you're still suspicious, and we're still going to call and find out who you are and get you to bend to our will, right? Because we're the city employee, right? This is our building. If you ever watch my videos online, one of the things you'll hear most often than not, what are you doing in our building? You got a lucky leprechaun in your pocket? Who's ours? You mean ours? Our building? Sure, yeah, I'm in our building that we allow you to work in, right, for us, right? This isn't your building. This is our building. This is everybody's building, including them, but it's everybody's building. And we allow you to work in it. And we allow you to buy computers and laptops and all these neat little gadgets and things that you need to perform your duty to who? To us, right? But they love to say, well, you're not everybody. I don't have to take care of you because you're not we the people, right? I'm a public servant, but only to we the people. And you know what I tell them? You can't get out of your obligation to serve me because I'm not everybody, right? Because then who do you serve? You serve nobody. Because we the people ain't walking in at any time, ever, right? Because we the people is every single person in that body, right? If it's the state of Florida, it's everybody in the state. That's we the people. We the people in Charlotte County is every single resident in Charlotte County. If there's one person missing, you don't have we the people. It's every single body in the county, in the state, in the nation. That's we the people. So even though they don't serve us singly, like a servant would, like a butler would if I was rich, or a maid, they still have to serve us, right? They still have to provide service. Now, do any of you use Google Maps? Okay. Go to Google Maps, pick out any city you want, in any state, and look up the government buildings. And look at the reviews on those government services and read some of those reviews. Now, most of them you'll find are people that don't have cameras, right? They won't have a link to a video showing you how they were mistreated. They'll just tell you how they were mistreated, right? And one of the things that gets me is that, because I work in the private sector, I work in service. I've been in service for 25 years, bartending and wait staff. I also own my own company that provides wait staff and bartenders to weddings and birthdays. And down in Miami, we do a lot of dinner parties for the mucky mucks over there and that kind of stuff, right? So in the private sector, I have to have a smile on my face all the time. How you doing, guys? Beautiful. All right. All the time. I have to be on my P's and Q's, right? But not when I work for the state. I can have the crappiest attitude you ever seen. What are you going to do? You going to tell my boss? My boss don't care. Look, you got a worse attitude than I do. You know? What are you going to do? We have unions. You can't get us fired. You know how hard it is to get a public employee fired? Ha! You got a better chance of winning the lotto. That ain't a joke. Right? So now money gets taken out of our wallet, whether we want to or not, gets taken out of our paycheck to pay for these people, for us to come in to get treated like we're dirt on their shoes. I can't believe you're going to pay your water bill today. Just doing my nails. You know? And that's the way they treat you. And you can see it in my video, but even more so if you go and just go and do it yourself. If you go and ask a couple questions yourself. If you ask one question that they don't like, oh, you'll see. You'll see how quickly things will turn. And how quickly you'll be getting that sorted out.
What is your site?
It's called Rogue Nation Audits.
Rogue?
Yep, ROGUENATION AUDITS. And that's on YouTube. All right? Rogue Nation, because the nation has gone rogue.
I got our.
Yep.
Your camera on? Yes, sir. You don't have my permission.
Uh-oh. Well, here's the thing with this. Whenever we're in public, we have the right to be filmed. Okay? That's why Walmart can film us. That's why the police officers have the body cam. That's why when we're at the beach and at Disney, other people can take pictures of their children with us walking behind them. We have no expectation of privacy in public. The government uses that to its full advantage, right? Now they have license plate readers. You know, as soon as you get off the interstate in some of these cities, they know exactly where you're going, who's going where, all that kind of stuff. So it's really picked up on surveillance of the citizen.
Are you in public when you're in a private members-only club?
You're in a public setting, okay? So, because everybody's a member of that club, right? So the thing about public is the expectation of privacy, where you would feel that you would have it, right? So if you and your husband are talking right now, there's other people near you that can hear you, right? So there would be no way that you could claim that you had an expectation of privacy. So now, in the same setting, if you and him were to walk over to the corner and whisper to each other to where no one could hear you, then you would claim an expectation of privacy because you tried to make it private. Now, even though you're still in public, right? You try to make that private. But normally, if there's other people around you that can overhear you, chances are there's no expectation of privacy. Now, in a bathroom, obviously there might be other people there, and that's an exception, right? Whenever you go into like a private office, right? That would be an exception because there's you and maybe the person whose office it is, right? That would be private as well. But when there's a group of people together, chances are no privacy, right? And there was a case out of Washington, D.C., where there was a young lady, and she was wearing too short of a skirt, right? She was sitting out on the plaza, and there was a gentleman across the way who was taking pictures. And the judge stated, he said, well, he wasn't doing anything extra, like trying to put the camera up under her skirt or anything like that. He said, everything that he took pictures of, he could see from public, right? So she ended up losing that case because, again, what we bring out into the public is not protected by the Fourth Amendment, right? So when you throw away trash, you know, and they got a lot of drug dealers with this. When they throw away the trash, the cops don't need a warrant to pick that trash up and to go through it because you threw that away, right? You gave away your expectation of privacy and you put it out on the curb, right? So it's not too tricky, but if you're ever concerned, just realize if somebody else can overhear you, you really have no privacy. And in a lot of public buildings, that's exactly the way it is when we go in there, a lot of times the government will try to have, stations set up. And they'll be trying to say, well, you can't come in here because we have private information going on. But to me, I'm thinking to myself, why would you have private information in a lobby where other citizens can overhear it? Now, I've got a great memory, especially for numbers, and I equate that to when I was a young guy, and I would go and I would get girls' numbers, and they would, oh yeah, my number's blah, 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 blah. I'd say blah, 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 blah. Memorize. Got it. No problem. I'll call you in 6 weeks, I'll still know the number. No big deal. Right? So if I'm sitting in the Social Security office, and people are over here, and they're, hey, what's your Social Security number? Oh, my number, blah, blah, blah. And I can hear that. They're already violating this person's privacy, regardless of what I do, regardless if I capture it on film, or I write it down, or I just remember it, right? So they'll try that excuse a lot of times, and we try not to let them pass that off. Besides the fact that the government is the one that's selling all of our information anyway. A story came out about 2 years ago where the DMV made $77 million selling our private information to debt collectors, right? So a lot of times the government, it's like that old adage where they'll say, oh, don't do this because they're the ones already doing it. You know what I mean? The government hates competition. Oh, don't come in here and record personal information because then we won't be able to sell it. How are we going to sell information that's already out online for free? That doesn't work for the government. We gotta take that information and we gotta sell it. So.
Also, this meeting was publicly announced. What's your opinion of Punta Gorda and Charlotte County banning filming in the public areas of government offices?
Well, it's funny you mention that because I'm actually going to be filing a lawsuit on Punta Gorda and Charlotte County for that same reason. I just 2 weeks ago, I filed a lawsuit against Easley, South Carolina, because they passed an ordinance similar to the one we have in Punta Gorda. Yes, and they even quoted the Sheets case in the thing there. So yeah, whenever we see something like that, we have to address that head on. And people always tell me, they say, man, George, how can the government pass an unconstitutional law? And I said, well, they do it all the time. I mean, how many people here think that because they lived in Chicago, they didn't have the Second Amendment anymore? You couldn't buy a handgun in Chicago or have one, even though you were an American citizen and you had the Second Amendment, right? So the government can pass as many unconstitutional laws as it wants. And the only way to get rid of them is to challenge it, right? To challenge them in court. That's it. Otherwise, you live like Chicago did for 30 years under that unconstitutional law. All right? So there's nothing that says they can't pass an unconstitutional law. There is something that says you can remove an unconstitutional law, but there's nothing that says that they can't pass it as long as people allow it. And people do allow it because, again, we're busy. We don't have time to keep up with government. When I go to these city council meetings, 3 or 4 people out of a town of 50,000. you get 3 or 4 people.
Is there any recourse for them passing the unconstitutional law in the first place? Is there any redress of grievances just for that, rather than just changing?
I mean, you have to sue them, because, I mean, you can, I've only seen one city that wised up and repealed the law themselves, right? Because they understood, if I don't repeal this law, these guys are coming and they're going to be suing. And I'm not shy about it. I spoke at Easley City Council the night they passed that ordinance. And I told them, I said, listen, this ordinance is unconstitutional. I said, if you pass it, I said, tomorrow I will be back here with an intent to sue. Okay? And I'll drop that off. And then 90 days later, I'll file my lawsuit on you. They passed the law. The next day I dropped off the intent to sue. Last week I sent in my lawsuit paperwork. I'm asking for $1 million. Okay? I probably won't get anywhere near that, but I want to let them know that if you pass unconstitutional laws, there's somebody that's going to do something about it, right? Because a lot of times they hear, I'm going to sue you this and I'm going to sue you that. Well, luckily for me, I've taken the time and done the research. Now I file my own lawsuit. I don't have to wait on a lawyer. I don't have to wait to see if somebody thinks, oh, that's a good case, or, I don't want to ruffle the feathers where I live, because a lot of lawyers don't like to take cases where they're at, because it's the people they work with, right? So now I file the cases myself, so I don't worry about that. When I tell you, hey, if you pass that, I'm going to sue. That's what's going to happen. Now, I might lose, but that's fine. But you will pay to defend that unconstitutional law against me. And we'll keep filing, me and my buddies, guys and girls, we'll keep filing until that's gone. And we'll keep at it until that's gone. Right? Thank you. Is there any questions or anything? Oh, sorry, did I miss you, sir?
Who pays for the defense when you bring a lawsuit against the county, the state?
The citizens pay for if it's against an officer, there's 2 kinds of capacities. There's individual and there's official capacity. If I sue an officer in his individual capacity and I be disqualified immunity, he pays me, not the citizen. If I sue the government in their official capacity, then it's always going to be the citizen that pays, right? Now, and I understand what you're saying, damn, we're suing, but we're hitting the local guy, right? We're hitting the local guy for the money for this. And that's a travesty. It's a travesty I hope will be remedied by citizens in these communities saying, wait a minute, why are my property taxes going up? Because they don't want to train the public employees to do what's right? Because they want to pass unconstitutional ordinances? Is that why I have to pay now? Because of this? And then the citizens, hopefully, this is the hope, right? Because nobody knows, nobody's written in stone, but the hope is that the citizens then take action themselves, locally, in their own, area, and say, hey, like in my area, I'm proactive. I go to the sheriff and I say, do you guys know about the First Amendment? Do you guys know that you can't violate people that are recording in public, right? Because I don't want somebody like me coming to my county and getting hemmed up, filming in the sheriff's department where he's allowed to, and having to pay a lawsuit. So I'm proactive, and I tell the sheriff, and I tell the deputies, hey, you guys know what you're doing out here? Because if not, you can get sued, right? And that's going to come from my money, right? So that's one good way to mitigate the cost to you.
Change the topic. Let's go back to what I walked in. Kickback, okay? I know it exists, can't prove it. Sunshine State paid You are just reading the news, okay, and I can't fix it. I have a book, that's all I have. Zoning change, okay? You had a group down off of, they wanted to put up condominium, okay? It was a real company, everybody, eventually, all right? And they got like 22 acres of private property and got a zoning change to put up a high rise, multiple high rises. My point is that our commission, okay, we put it allow zoning change. And the only way you can do that is money wise everything.
Absolutely.
But it's very difficult to prove. It's done.
It's hard to prove. Some might even say it's impossible to prove, right? And I can guarantee it'll never be proven by us sitting on our asses, right?
George Soros with more money than God, if you will, and you want to push it one way, look what's happening.
Absolutely.
And you want to get somebody else to push it another way, guess what? We may survive.
Right, and you know, in facing a lot of those odds, we have to realize that this stuff is big money, right? Government corruption, tyranny, this is big money, right? And if the mafia is going to kill somebody over $10,000, you can guarantee that the government is going to kill somebody over $100 million, right? So when I say that every time I go out there, I'm possibly taking my life in my hands, I absolutely mean that, right? Because I could stumble across something. I'll tell you something I stumbled across a while back that never ended up really getting resolved. But a council member in a county here in Florida, up in the Panhandle, he called me up and he said to me, he said, George, the sheriff is the guy bringing all the methamphetamine into the county. Okay? Not only is he bringing all the methamphetamine into the county, he's keeping the deputies away from the little town where there's a drugstore that is selling the needles, right? And this guy got word of this because they had a flood there after one of the storms one year, this little town did, right? And the county's made up of a whole bunch of little towns. It's in the Panhandle. I'm not going to say the county because the guy's still the sheriff there. He's probably still dealing meth. But there was a flood. And they brought in those pumpers to pump the streets out. And the pumper got clogged. So the guy called the city councilman. The guy goes down there to help unplug this, do whatever. He says it's full of needles. It was plugged up with needles from the street. That's how bad it was there. Okay? And that's how he found out about it. And what had happened was is the sheriff, his sister and her husband used to be the big dealers in the county, bringing in all the methamphetamine. Well, her husband died. So he stepped in to help his sister with the drug trade, right? And I did a story on it, and I stood in front of his sister's house with a big sign behind me that said, elect him. And I told him, I said, we know you're selling drugs. We know you're selling drugs in the county. I said, we're going to be keeping an eye on you. Now, it's the closest I could come without specifically naming him, okay, and saying, hey, Sheriff, you know, because at that time we didn't have any viable evidence, right? We didn't have no camera work on him or anything of that nature. So we had to tread softly, but we wanted to let him know that we knew what he was going on, what he was doing. Now that city council member, county council member, he's gone from that city council. He ran for his life. He's living in Texas now, and he's trying to get on the San Antonio, Texas board out there, right? Because he's a really great guy. He's a really good, freedom-oriented gentleman, which boggles my mind how he got elected in this county up there, because it's none of the good old boys. And then this guy's a Jewish guy from New York. I don't know. He was surprised. I don't know how I got elected, but I did. And he helped a lot of people up there with the money from the storm damage, right? Because counties like to put their little fingers in there and move the money all around, and all of a sudden you know it's all gone. One of the other things I like to do in my audits when I go around is I like to do credit card checks, right? Every county, every city, they issue credit cards to people that work for the county, usually the directors of the agency, whatever. So I'll request a 3-month copy of those credit card receipts. And I can tell you, hands down, that we're paying for a lot of stuff that we don't know we're paying for, right? We're paying for food all the time, and not just food for like, take to the office. Like, oh, I'm gonna take some donuts to the office today. Let me slide my Krispy Kreme and buy 8 dozen, right? Like, you can tell when people are paying $5 and $7 for food on their way home. Picking up a gallon of milk on their way home, right? I had one lady who purchased school uniforms for her kids on the county credit card. Now, when I asked, because what happens is when you ask for the receipts, they'll send you the statement, right? The statement will tell you what company and how much was spent, but it won't tell you what it was spent on, right? You gotta request the receipt back. So I requested from Fort Pierce, Florida, I requested their credit card records. I looked through them and I identified 27 questionable purchases. So I made the request for those receipts. Guess how much they wanted to charge me for the receipts? $270. $10 per receipt. There were some receipts I asked for where the cost of what was purchased wasn't $10, right? $10 per receipt. And that's how they keep stuff in, right? Because even though we got the sunshine laws, like the gentleman's saying, there's no enforcement of the sunshine laws.
Would you be allowed to view the receipt at their building without having to pay money?
You can. There's a provision in the state law that allows you to inspect the records. And those are supposed to be free, but what they like to do is say, well, it took us so long to find these receipts. So they're always going to put a charge up, right? Now, it might not be $270, it might only be $20 or $50. But these are the things that they're doing. And a lot of times they're not letting us get the records at all. I've got people that are wanting records up in the panhandle now on a couple different instances, and they're not getting them, right? And the only thing you can do is sue. That's it. That's the only way. Go ahead.
FPNL are getting ready to change their charges. So how do you go about against that, or for that, or not for that?
The Florida Power and Light?
Yeah.
Is that a public company?
Yeah.
We have Seco Energy up by where I'm at, so that's not a public company.
So they're getting ready to change their charges.
I would say in that instance, it would have to be, you'd have to take that to their board, wouldn't you? And see what kind of, yeah, I'm sure most of these companies like that have a board that make those kind of decisions. So I haven't messed with a lot of utility companies, to be honest, but where I would start, if it is a public company, is I would try to start running down the numbers. Why do they need this increase? What's it going to be for? Right?
Who do you address?
Well, if you're looking for records, there's usually always a records custodian. A few years ago, a buddy of ours was going around requesting public records, and when they wouldn't give them to him, he would sue. And he would do it lickety split like that. So what the state of Florida did was it said, okay, if you want public records, before you can sue, you have to write out in writing and send it to the custodian of records 10 days before you can begin a lawsuit. Okay? So now every public agency is supposed to have their record custodian posted somewhere, right? So if you go into your FPL office, right? Look around the office, there's somewhere there should be a posting of that record custodian. If not, whoever's at the reception desk should be able to help you out, right? And then get those records and then go through them. And then when you go through those records and you see, well, you guys don't really need an increase, right? Because you got plenty of money as it is. One of the biggest things that's going on right now.
They want you to not have the paper billing so that they can save money. Okay, so that should come off of that as well.
Of course.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I don't have to tell you folks. We all know it. Nothing ever goes down. Nothing ever goes down.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what it is. Oh, you know, we're raising money for this, but nothing ever goes down. It's like the toll roads. You know, when they say, oh, we're going to make a toll road. For 10 years, you'll pay this toll, and then after that, we'll take away the toll. That's never happened. Never happened.
So really, we don't have any recourse.
Right, pretty much. I mean, again, we can ask questions and we can expose, right? That's basically public shaming, right? Is what I do basically. Is I shame our officials publicly, right? Because when they act like children, when they act ungrateful, when they try to hide stuff, you know, because I'm just walking in on the camera, right? And my theory is the same theory they use against me. If I have nothing to hide, what am I worried about, right? The government, they want to come and look in my underwear drawer. And they say, oh, you got nothing to hide, what are you worried about? Okay, I can live with that. What do you guys hide? How come I can't look? National security? I had one guy, I was at the water department, right? Walked into the water department, me and my buddy, we walked in on the camera. Oh, you can't record here. Why not? Well, you know, this day and age, everything that's going on. Yeah. Robberies. So, somebody's robbed the water department? They steal a toilet? How often have you guys been robbed here? I said. Well, never. I said, well, how often has something bad happened here? Well, never. Okay. All right. I get you. So I tell people, I said, when did Americans become a nation of people so scared of everything around us?
Amen.
Right?
Amen. 9/11.
9/11.
Everybody to watch everybody filming something to call them in.
See something, say something.
And everybody was put under a microscope. And ever since then, if you go in the building with a camera, you're a terrorist.
Absolutely.
Why are you filming this building? Are you trying to bomb us? This is what's going on.
And I tell people, you have more of a chance of winning the lottery than dying in a terrorist attack, you know? Some things in life we have to live with, right? We have to live with getting old, right? There's nothing stopping us there. We have to live with dying. We have to live with paying taxes. Nothing is going to stop that, right? If somebody wants to, shove a stick of dynamite up their bunghole and run into a crowd, they're going to do it. And guess what? If the government regulates dynamite, they'll come up with something else to stick up their bunghole and run into the crowd with, right? Like, you can't stop idiocy. You can't stop these people that are crazy. You know, this is something that we have to live with. Instead of looking like everything is out to get us, you know, let's live. Let's live our life. You know, and most people, I get to the end of a minute, sir. Most people, when you ask, doesn't matter who you ask, what political party, what nation, most humans just want to take care of their family, be left alone, right? To do what we want to do, that's legal, right? I'm sure we can all agree, we all want people out there doing stuff that's illegal. You know, children's stuff and all kinds of nasty stuff. We don't want that, right? But if people are living their lives legally, doing what they should be doing. You should leave them alone. Government should leave them alone. I should never have government coming up to me, right? But we do now. And let me,
Getting on the plane now.
look,
Now all the restrictions.
well, let's look at an agency,
You have to
CPS,
stay involved.
okay? Child Protective Services, right? Now, it's a great idea. We want to get children away from bad parents, right? What happens when CPS does their job correctly? Right? They take all the bad parents off the street, right? All the kids are nice new foster homes, right? Well, then they're out of a job. So every year, they have to find more people that they can categorize as bad parents. Because if I've already got all the bad parents off the street, you guys don't need me anymore. Same thing with crime. We arrest all the criminals, and they're all doing hard time. What do you need me for? Right? Now the streets are safe. Now you don't need as many of us. So there's always going to be that uptick, right? When I was a kid, I would hop on my bike. I would drive all the way across town. I'd be gone all day. My mother wouldn't have a damn clue where I was. Not a lick in spite of anything. She wouldn't know anywhere where I was. And that was totally fine. But today, your child's halfway down the block in a park, you're a free-range parent. You need to be, rounded up. CPS is coming for you. You can't allow your child to play in the yard unsupervised.
But they let them go to these stupid drag queen shows. I don't get it. Why are we arresting the freaking parents that are allowing this to take their kids to a drag queen show?
Well,
They're scared. They're scared.
you know, the problem I think a lot of times is that we have too much nonsense freedom, I call it, right? So you put a whole bunch of options in front of people, right? Keep them busy. But really, it's just smoke and mirrors. None of it really matters as far as life's concerned, right? And they keep you busy doing stuff like that. Same thing with the TV channel. You got 530. Why? Why? Half of it's crap. Half of it's in another language you can't even understand. Why?
What I'm saying is CBS would have a job if they go after these parents and take them to the drag shows.
Well, go ahead, sir.
Yes, do you believe sometimes if you expose the corruption too much, they weaponize government to crucify it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, a lot of the guys that do what I do won't work in their county because they're afraid of retaliation, right? And I'll give you a perfect example. I can give you the gentleman's name. It's a gentleman named Chris Love. Okay, he's from, what's that town by Miami? Big rodeo town.
Homestead?
No, it's
Florida City?
no, it's like in Miami. It's by Miami. It's a little bit north of Miami.
Broward?
I can't remember what the name of the town is right now. I'm sorry, folks. It'll come to me sooner or later. But anyway, this gentleman, Chris Love, he's lived there his whole life. He was a rodeo star for 17 years, right? He left the rodeo. He's now a marksman. He teaches handgun safety, shooting, stuff like that. He grew up with the mayor and the city manager his whole life. He's walking out of a Crystal one day. He's got his food in one hand and drink in the other, and the gentleman shoots tobacco. And he said he had a spit in his mouth. He walked outside of the restaurant, and as he walked outside of the restaurant, there were two officers that were approaching. One of them had bumped into him, and after he had spit, he turned around and said, "Hey, what's the problem here?" Well, one of the officers, and this gentleman was white. The officers, one was white, one was black. The white officer turned to him and called him an N-word, even though the gentleman was white. And my buddy was so taken back. He what? What are you talking about? What's going on? What's all this about? And they had a little back and forth, and they left, and then he went on his way. Well, he went to his good buddy, the city manager, the next day, and said, "Look," he goes, I want some accountability here. right? I want these guys retrained. So the mayor's like, yeah, buddy, no problem. So him being a smart guy, he requested the records of them being retrained. And he calls me up and he says, George, he goes, none of this stuff that they were supposed to train these guys on happened. He says, I don't understand. And I said, well, that's par for the course. That's government. They'll tell you they're going to do something. They're never going to do it. They'll just tell you they did it just to shut you up, right? He says, well, I'm not going for that. So he keeps going back to talk to the city manager and the mayor, because these are people that he grew up with his whole life. Went to school with them, good friends with them, lived a block away from the mayor, okay, his whole life. They stonewalled him, okay, wouldn't talk to the guy. So he says, you know what? I'm running for mayor now, okay? He's going to run for mayor, he's going to clean it up. So over the next couple of weeks, not only did his wife, who works at a hospital, get called and threatened of her losing her job, every single one of his neighbors, his property that touched his, all got code enforcement called out. And they all got fines. And you know what they told those neighbors? It's because Chris is running for mayor. As soon as he stops running for mayor, you won't see us again. Yeah. And he called me up and he said, George, he goes, I'd love to fight the good fight. He goes, but I can't. He said, my wife won't let me. I'll lose my job, I'll lose my house, my wife will lose the job. I gotta let it go. And that's what he did. He just let it go. But that's what they do. That's how they get you. Another thing up in the Walton County area was there's a lady, she had called me up and I went up there. Her and her husband are English.
That's my best friend. I know her.
Yeah, okay. Her husband moved here 4 years ago. They bought property, like 47 acres up there, right? And they have a pavilion. They sell drinks. They sell food, okay? They have bands there and stuff. Well, right down the road from Kate's Pavilion is a restaurant that's owned by a city council member, county council member. Used to be. Now, when her business started picking up, his started to decline. Yeah. Kate told me she had in 4 years 200 to 250 visits from code enforcement.
I was there. We watched them rotating 24 hours.
Okay. Because they dared to challenge the city council. You know? So it's hard to get transparency, if ever, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, right? And that doesn't mean, even if we can't, there's a lot of people that support me in my work that physically can't get out, emotionally can't get out, for whatever reason. I got a gentleman who's got a high government security clearance. He can't get out, or else he'll lose his security clearance, he'll lose his job. I have officers, I have mayors and other people that support my work, but they have to do it in the back, right? Because they can't let people know that they're supporting me because of the retaliation. So, I mean, there are still people out there that care about what it's going to look like for our children, you know?
Yes.
With $30 trillion in debt, not counting the unfunded liabilities of Medicaid, Social Security. You know what I mean? A lot of people say, oh, we're only $30 trillion in debt. We're about $200 trillion in debt. And they're like, oh, that's unfunded. That's unfunded obligations. I said, what do you think is going to happen when you tell 50 million Americans that they're not getting Social Security anymore because it wasn't funded? What do you think is going to happen? You know? And the private companies are no better. The pension systems in the state, if you look, most states are underfunded on all their pensions. California's the worst, coming in. CalPERS is like 70% underfunded, right? And that's because they're basing the next 20 years at a 10% per year growth, right? Which is stupid, right? And that's what they're doing. And people are letting them get away with it. Who in the right mind goes, I'm going to work for government. I'm going to work there for 30 years. and my last year that I'm working, I'm going to make $50,000. I'm going to be productive. And I'm going to retire. And in my retirement, the last year of my retirement, I'm going to make $100,000 a year, right? Because those are the deals they're getting, right? Make $100,000 20 years after I'm in retirement. And I'm not productive, right? How is that sustainable? How does somebody say, yeah, working all day I make $50,000, but fishing all day I make $100,000. That sounds like it'll work. Who believes it, right? And then so what happens? Well, not a lot has happened yet because we keep borrowing money. So it seems like the good times are still here, right? Let Gary, Indiana borrow $1 billion. I bet you they think they're the most prosperous city on the planet, right? So borrowed money is not prosperity, right? So what do you think is going to happen when all these bills come due, right? I mean, there's going to have to be some kind of reckoning, right? Some kind of devaluing of the dollar, like they did back in the 30s when they took the gold, and then next day they bumped it up from $20 to $35 an ounce. Ooh.
Federal Reserve.
Ooh, I like that. Half my money. I got $100,000 in the bank now, it's worth 50, count me in. You know what I mean? So, and I was talking to a gentleman earlier tonight, Fed Now is coming. Fed Now is coming in July. You can read that on the Federal Reserve Bank's website. Okay? They're going digital. Okay? And what it means when it goes digital is there's nowhere to hide. Right? And now they have control of the money. It's like a spigot. They can turn it on, they can turn it off. Everybody knows about the social credits that are going down in China right now. Your social credit tells you how good of a citizen you are.
Thank you,
Do
China.
you question the government? If you don't question the government, you're a good citizen. And we've got benefits for you. And we've got money for you. But if you question the government, you question what we do, you're a bad citizen. We're going to have to turn off that money spigot. You're going to be living in the slums, buddy, till you wise up. Re-education. I'm now re-educated. I know that the government is there to protect us, hold our hands, and wipe our little tushes. Everything will be okay.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I'm going to stop talking you guys' ears off. If anybody's got questions about what I do or anything, I'll take them.
There was a statement made by Winston Churchill that said, American government is the worst form of government in the world, except for all them.
We are, you know, no matter.
Overseas, and I've seen what it's like.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, listen, and that's, you know, that's something that everybody likes to say. Well, if you don't like it here, you can live somewhere else.
No.
You know, if you don't like what we got here, you can go somewhere else. But I want to be clear, okay? We are Americans, the common man. We are better off than any common man in any society in the history of mankind. All right? Even all the world, we are still better off than any common man in society in the history of the world. However, we haven't reached the pinnacle of freedom yet. There's more up top to get, right? There's more freedom to be had. We can't just rest on our laurels because, hey, you know, we made it as far as everybody else in the world's made it so far, so we're good, right? So we don't have to worry about free speech or this or you know, free guns or anything else because we're at the pinnacle, right? And the government, they trust, you know, we trust them and they're going to do what's right. We always have to strive for more freedom, right? There's two things in life that the human soul yearns for, okay? We actually yearn for this. It's like an addiction. One is love, right? Acceptance from our fellow peers, right? We're social creatures, right? We're not living in the woods like the Unabomber, right? That's one thing. The other thing that the human spirit yearns for is freedom, right? Whenever we feel we're not free, we yearn for freedom, okay? The people in China and North Korea, every day they wake up, they yearn for freedom. They feel it in their soul. They know they're missing something, right? But we can be tricked. We can be tricked into thinking that we are free. And that'll say, that'll calm that yearning, right? Because we think we're free, therefore we must be free, right? But when we look around, we're not. And I'll tell you how you know. Because when the state can come and take anything and everything up to and including your life and face no consequences for those actions, you're not free. Okay, when the state can bust down your door and shoot you because you wake up in the middle of the night, you grab your gun and go fight off the intruders, and they shoot you, and they say, well, you know what? The wrong address on this warrant, Bob. Bob, the wrong address on this warrant. That's all right. We got qualified immunity. We'll just say it was a mistake. The guy come at us with a gun. What guy would come at us with a gun when someone's breaking in their house in the middle of the night? They didn't announce that they were the police.
All of us.
Right. So, but they don't care because there's no consequences for their actions, right? And we allow them to get away with these actions, and that's why a lot of the citizens, when they see these shootings and stuff like that, they're up in arms. Because if you notice, when government gets charged with a crime, there's usually some hush-hush that goes on. The charges either go away, or they get very reduced sentences, right? And they don't have that same punishment that a citizen would have.
They investigate themselves, or?
Well, that too. They investigate themselves and they say, oh, we've done nothing wrong, And I've got a lawsuit going right now against the Mobile Police Department, where I was standing on the side of the road, filming. And they came up and they detained me and they asked for my ID. And I'm at the part of the lawsuit now, summary judgment. And the defense, their lawyer is saying, well, this guy's, we didn't violate his rights, because he wasn't supposed to be there. They will do anything and everything in their power to make it out to be our fault and not their fault. It's always our fault. You know what I mean? And that's why in a lot of these instances, when we're filming, one second, man, when we're filming and people try to come up and they try to put hands on me, I've been pushed out of buildings, I've been thrown out of buildings, and people in my comments will say, man, that guy put his hands on you. You should have defended yourself. And I tell them, I say, no, sir. No, sir, will I ever. Because what will happen, and what has happened, not to me, but to the people I know, is that when they did defend themselves, the cops show up, and it's my buddy who doesn't work for the state, an employee that does work for the state, and my buddy goes to jail. And the person that works for the state, nothing happens to them.
Innocent to proven guilty.
Yeah, I tried it. That's what it's supposed to be, but that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. Any interaction with the police, when they roll up, what are you doing? I got reports that you were doing this. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. You got ID? Yeah. They come up to me and they say, well, do you have ID? You're suspicious. He says, and I told the police officer this one time, he said, I don't know what's going on. And I said, well, how is my ID going to tell you what's going on? And he said something else, and I told him, I said, man, you need to take that shit on the road. Because that's a good trick. I can give you my ID and you can tell me what's going on. So, I mean, the logic. Some of the stuff I hear, you would never believe. You would never believe what these people say. You would never believe how these people act. Hold on, let me get to this young man right here real quick.
About the office knocked on the door, investigating a rip-off of the air conditioner behind our house.
Well, why don't you tell us, since you're over the phone?
I'll never let another sheriff or so we stand in our community investigating a crime by a perpetrator or whoever behind our house. A nice neighborhood, so and I jumped out here, no idea what he was talking about. I went to the garage or to the laundry room to get my shoes.
And the cop put his hand on the
Grabbed his hand like after he asked me my name and so and I was so indignant, okay? I didn't get nasty, but I got my shoes, walked away. This is over. Police and police. I am for the sheriff of police. But I will never let a cop come in to my domicile without a warrant.
Absolutely.
Stay outside.
This man brought up a good point. And let me point out to you folks that a lot of us that do this aren't against government or police. We're against bad government and bad police. And that's something that everybody should be behind, including government and the police, right? Because I tell the police when I'm there, I say,
that's why we have guns to protect us from the government.
that's right. That's right. So we're not against, all these people. We're against the bad people, right? And there are good cops and there are good public servants. And I know this because they send me tips about the bad ones, right? So I have firsthand experience and can say with conviction that there are good people working in these jobs that have no outlet, that they have no way, they have nowhere to tell, they have nowhere to go. There's a message board online. It's called Law Enforcement LEO Forum, I think it's called. It's a message board, but it's where officers go and talk, okay? And they can talk about whatever. And I go on there and I read that, and there's a lot of stuff that they air out there about their departments, about a lieutenant who drinks and drives all the time, right? And he was caught. This same lieutenant was caught on camera by the news, passed out at a stoplight. Cops came up, opened up the door, got him away, sent him on his way. No DUI, right? And they talk about him. The younger officers in that department, they talk about him online. So the guy goes out, drinks all the time in his paid for vehicle. And this is something that we have to, pay for and watch for. I just did a body cam footage of a state representative up in Hartford, Connecticut. She was so drunk, she ended up flipping her car, right? And then she wants, special treatment. There was another young lady, I want to say it was down here in Gainesville, who arrested an officer, a corporal, her supervisor, her superior, because he was drunk. And as they're standing in the booking area, you hear them talking back and forth, and he's like, oh man, there's cameras on. He's like, I can't blow into the machine, right? Because he knows he's drunk. So he asks her, I'm body cam, can you blow for me? And she says, you know I can't do that. Where would he even get the ideal that asking is acceptable? Why? What did he drink that made it seem like it was cool to ask my coworker to blow for me?
Do you feel at the root of all of these problems is the moral decay in our nation? And what remedy is there unless we morally restore our nation?
Well, it's absolutely in decay. It's absolutely in decay. You can see it in every facet of life. You can see propaganda in every facet of life. I'm sure everybody here remembers Baby, it's cold outside. They took that off the radio. And they put on some real nasty stuff on the radio, and that's okay. But Baby, it's cold outside is not okay, right? But the problem that we face as Americans, and the problem that everybody in the world faces as humans, is basically they never taught us how our minds work, okay? So a lot of our issues come from the fact that when we're adults, every adult in the world, doesn't matter where you're from, you use three things every day of your adult life. Every human in the world does. You use your mind, you use your money, and you use the law. And 99.9% of the world has barely a passing understanding of those three topics. Most people today think that Federal Reserve notes are money. Even though if you look in federal law, 12 U.S.C. 411, it's pretty interesting, 411, they're going to be the 411, but it says that Federal Reserve notes are general obligations of the United States government, and they can be redeemed for lawful money at any Federal Reserve Bank or at the U.S. Treasury Department. Okay? So basically what you have for money is IOUs. All right? That's what we have for our money. Most people don't realize that. Okay? Most people don't realize that when they're flipping on a TV station, a TV news channel, they don't realize they're doing that because of confirmation bias. Because they never taught us about confirmation bias, right? They never taught us that we don't look for stuff to educate ourselves with. We look for stuff to pat ourselves on the back and say, man, you're so smart. That's why people turn on the news that they do. They don't turn it on to hear the news, because none of it's news anymore, right? If I tell people if it's on the news, it was news 6 months ago, 2 weeks ago. It's not news today. But what people do is they turn on that news. You know why? Because the guy on the TV is saying, guys, it's the other guy's fault. It's their fault. You were right all along. Pat yourself on the back. Smart person, you. That's what we turn on our TV news to listen to. When you ask anybody, you step out on the street, you say, hey, what's wrong with America? You're going to get 50% answer. It's one party. The other 50% is going to say, it's that party. That's what's wrong with America. You're never, ever going to get a person that says, I'm what's wrong with America. I'm what's wrong with America. My apathy, my sitting on the couch, playing Xbox, watching TV, going fishing, living my small life, not worrying about what's going on, because, hey, I voted, right? I'm done with my duty. I voted for the guy that I think is going to do the best. I don't really care what he does. I don't have time to watch what he does. I can, skip through some laws, maybe. I can turn on my favorite news program, which is going to tell me that my guy's the good guy. It's going to tell me my guy's the right guy, and everything he does is golden. It's a phenomenon. It's insane. But every election cycle I watch it. As one party moves into the White House and in the power, and then the party that's out of power, oh, well, now the government's out of control. Now there's all kinds of conspiracy theories. I've lived through 5, 6 antichrists already. Every time there's an election, it's the antichrist. Now the government can't be trusted because this guy's in power. Oh, well, now this guy's in power. Oh, well, now the government can't be trusted. My guy's in power now. There's no corruption. Government's running just like it should be. That's the problem. So, it's going to take a lot. And it's impossible because every mode of education is blocked. Right? The public education, control.
Amen.
Media,
education.
control. It's all control.
Indoctrination.
We can't get our message out because they don't want us to get our message out.
That's right.
You know, it does the United States government no good to have 330 million intelligent people questioning what they're doing. How does that help them? They want 330 million people working at Walmart. That's what they want. They want 330 million people working their butts off, going home, watching the boob tube, drinking a Budweiser, going to bed, and repeating it the next day. That's what they want.
Stay involved.
Yeah.
What I've noticed so far is like we have a common law in the state of Florida, common law. But the judges don't see common law, and the common law is actually for the people. And we've actually have done a couple of things for common law, and trying to push it to equity court, which it's not equity when it's actually something that's got to do with nothing about money at all.
Well, you know, that's a topic and a situation that goes very, very, very deep. And you have to get into society and the societal contract and the obligations that we owe as citizens and the rights and responsibilities that the government owes us.
Yeah. Well, we process the judge, the several of the judges that's here locally. We've actually processed different things, so they can't say that they don't have common law or they don't know anything about common law because we sent it to them. And the state statute still has common law. So we sent it and we process each one of them. And to me, they just still don't want to go back to where that's really for us, it's the people.
Right. And every law that it passed, more freedom is taken from us, whether it directly affects us at that time or not.
In Indiana, they still have common law.
Right. And they don't have common law marriage and stuff like that. Now, here's a perfect example. Most people don't realize that the civil marriage license is a contract with the state. Okay? When we get married, it's supposed to be between you, your spouse, and God. Right? Holy matrimony is what it's called. Now, most people don't realize that the church didn't get involved with marriage until around the 1500s. Okay? Before then, the church was never involved with marriage. Okay? Way back in the day, it was called pair bonding, is what it was called. Okay? But around the 1500s, the churches started getting into it. Around the 1800s, government started getting into it. Okay? So now, we no longer have holy matrimony, we have a marriage, civil marriage. Okay? And in the law here in the United States, the civil marriage license is a contract. And it's a contract between you, your spouse, and the state. Nothing to do with God, nothing to do with anything of that nature. Okay? It's between you folks. And in law, it's called a sui generis contract. It's ever changing. That's why a divorce is only a modification of the contract. It's not a cancellation. And it's one of the strongest contracts that the state has over its citizens. And again, it allows stuff like the family law courts to go on, CPS to go on. There's a legal document called Parents Parente that's come to us from England, and it means father of the country. And so what had happened is back in the day, the king would take care of the orphans, right? That had no parents or whatever. It was up to the king to have an orphanage and all that other stuff. Well, that came to us from England as well. And I've actually read court cases where the judge has stated that the child doesn't go home with us after birth because we're the natural parents. It's not why the child goes home with us. It goes home with us because we are the best equipped to raise the child for the state. Because the state looks at the children as its property. And that's why CPS can come in and take your child pretty much at any time at once with very little allegation. Is because they look at the child as part of the property of the state. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, really. Yeah, once you become an employee of the United States of America with your Social Security, because now
Social Security is voluntary. It's always been voluntary.
paying them.
Yeah, Social Security's always been voluntary. They tricked us into believing that we needed it, but if you actually look at the laws, there are exemptions. It's like a $50 fee, right, to fill out the form and say that you don't want to use your Social Security card. The employer is only required to ask. By statute, you can read the statute yourself. They're only required to ask you for your Social Security number. You're not obligated to give it.
That's right.
But we're strict in believing that we need that Social Security number. And again, it's all about control. Just like the Licensing Act. How many people realize that when we first started having driver's license, there were no tests? There were no tests. You could be 12 years old and send in a quarter, and they would send you a license. This is the truth. How many people realize that licenses weren't even required in South Dakota until 1954? Does that mean that there were no cars in South Dakota until 1954? Absolutely not. But it's always been about control. It's never been about safety. It's never been about anything like that. Like the seatbelt laws. They're not about saving anybody. If that was the case, all of our school buses would have seatbelts on it, right? Because it's all about the kids, right? We're trying to protect the children. But you won't find one dang school bus with a seatbelt on it. Right. So if it's about safety, why do the school buses have seatbelts? It's not about safety. The seatbelt law and the seatbelt tickets and stuff is about saving the insurance company money, right? Because when you didn't have a seatbelt on, you got much more hurt, right? You fly through the windshield, you roll on the ground. Yeah. Well, it's always about money. It always revolves right around back to money.
And I've noticed that it's okay for the government to film us when we come to their buildings, but we can't be filming them, right, Dave?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that should be a red flag right there to most of us, right? Because if someone doesn't want what they're doing seen, especially when it's a public duty, then there's an issue there, right? I have nothing to hide when I do my work.
When you go into a building and you have a camera, does it have to be a camera they can see? Or can you have a camera, a pen, your glasses, whatever, that they don't realize is a camera?
I have all of those, and again, as long as there's no expectation of privacy, because what they have is they have what's known as a wiretap law, right? And court is a two-party consent state. So as long as you're in an area, again, where there's no expectation of privacy, then the wiretap law does not apply. Okay, so I can go in with the cameras on and record, and there'd be absolutely nothing they can do about it. They wouldn't like it. They'd probably try to press the wiretap law against me, but when it came down to the court, I would do it. Okay, so because a lot of people are antsy about recording, and doing all that other kind of stuff. I mean, if nothing else, I bought for $20. I bought a little USB drive, and it records audio. It records audio for 7 hours. You can pop that thing on. You can wear it around a string on your neck, and you can record all the audio you want. And again, as long as you're in an area there's no expectation of privacy, you're good. And even more so than that is, if I'm recording something and I'm not in a place there's no expectation of privacy, if I'm not doing anything with that, then it's really not illegal either. Right? Just like it's not illegal if everybody was to put their Social Security card out here on the table, and I was to come by and film that, nothing illegal there either. The illegal part comes when I take that Social Security card and that number and I use it to do something I shouldn't. That's the illegal part, right? So any of that stuff that they try to get, if you watch my videos, you'll say, oh, well, these are, confidential information and blah, blah, blah. It could possibly well be, but there's no crime committed until I use that information in a nefarious purpose, So, same thing with HIPAA. I don't know how many people are familiar with HIPAA, but I go into a lot of health departments, stuff like that. They always love to use HIPAA. Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act. But what they fail to realize is that the citizens aren't accountable to HIPAA. Only the medical providers and their subcontractors are liable to HIPAA. And it's a fine, usually it's a civil fine. And so I like to tell them that if a doctor was to walk out of the office and drop somebody's medical file in front of me, I could record that all day long, I could post that on the internet all day long, and I'm not in trouble. And I'm under no obligation to keep anybody's medical data private, right? So if someone comes to me and tells me their medical information, I was just saying it out loud somewhere, I'm not in trouble. I'm not required to keep that information quiet. So, yeah, the law's vast. So, it's always nice to look and stuff and see what's going on. But I can tell you that I'm 49 years old now, and I never felt as free as when I picked up the law and started reading the law and found out what people could do and what they couldn't do. It saved me in so many instances, and I pushed so many limits. I had my headlight out for 5 months. I left one of my headlights out for 5 months, trying to get a ticket so I could go talk to a judge. Because judges, they don't have tea times. You can't get an appointment to go talk to a judge. You gotta get a ticket. So I drove around for 5-6 months with one of my headlights out. I got pulled over 5 times. I got 5 warnings. The last officer that came up in my car said, "Do you know your headlights out?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Are you trying to get a ticket?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "I'm not giving you one." Finally, the wife said, "Fix that." I said, "All right." I left my tail light out for over a year. Drove all the way up to Chicago. Drove around Chicago for 5 months, meeting my family on an extended stay. We got family up there. Then I drove back down after a year. Never got a ticket. They pulled me over one time. Because in the state of Florida, it says you have to have 2 working lights, but it doesn't say that there have to be 2 parallel lights. Most cars have 3 lights now, right? So you have to have brake lights. They have to be parallel, right? But it doesn't say those are the ones that have to be working. This says you have to have 2 working. So there's all kinds of little tricks in the law, and that's why I say when you know the law, you're more confident about whatever it is you're doing, Before I knew the law, even, when I wasn't doing anything wrong, when an officer got behind me, I'd get nervous, But now I don't get nervous. As a matter of fact, me and the family got pulled over the other day. I didn't have my seatbelt on, it was my fault, and he pulled us over, and there was no nervousness at all, because I know what is allowed, what's not allowed, what he can do, what he can't do, and, I know my rights and freedoms. I know I can defend myself legally. 200 years ago, you weren't considered a learned person if you didn't know the law. If you couldn't handle your own legal affairs, you weren't considered by society as a learned person. So, like I said, 3 things in our life that we use every day: our mind, our money, and the law. And if we want to position ourselves to be as free as possible, then we need a better understanding of all 3 of those topics. The mind first, because what happens is when, and I don't know how many people are into psychology, but I got into psychology when I wanted to find out why are people ignoring these obvious signs, right? Why is this stuff on TV and people are ignoring it? And I got into psychology, I got into groupthink, I got into biases, and I got into belief system. How many people here know the one thing that controls every action a human does? Does anybody know? Or what filters every piece of information that comes into our brain? Anybody? No? Not the eyes. Because we can also get information for readers. Right? We can hear it on TV, somebody can read it to us. Our beliefs. Our beliefs control every action we take, whether we know it or not, subconsciously. Right? If you're a vegan, it's probably because you believe that red meat's bad for you. If you wake up at 6 a.m., because you believe the early bird gets the worm. Right? Productive people get up early. Right? That's what I believe. And our beliefs control the information that comes into our brain, right? So whenever we have a belief, anything that goes against that belief automatically, subconsciously gets discarded by our brain as being false, okay? And it's just the way the brain works. It's just the way the brain works to keep it clutter-free, right? Because our brain is like a computer. It's like our supercomputer, right? And it needs virus protection, right? And they've done studies, okay? When we love somebody, when we're attached to somebody, the critical thinking element of our brain shuts off. That's why in relationships, whenever there's a spouse that has stepped out, our first response, bar none, is disbelief. Because the mind can't accept that. It rejects that. Right? They couldn't do that. They would never do that. It's disbelief, because the mind automatically rejects that because it's not your belief. And that's why two people can see the exact same circumstance and give two different stories of what happened. Because psychologists call it belief glasses. We see everything through our beliefs. And that's how we interpret it. That's how we interpret reality. And that's why reality is different from some people than other people. That's why the reality for Democrats is different than the reality of the Republicans.
But then there's the truth.
And then there's the truth. That's correct. That's correct. And so I tell people not to have beliefs, to have theories, or have.
That lady is correct. We are a divided nation.
Correct.
Many people.
They want us to buy it.
Yes.
This isn't by accident, folks. This is not by accident. Listen, the best way to do it is I'm going to give half of you these beliefs, right? And I'm going to give you half these beliefs. And guess what you're going to do? You're going to fight the rest of your days until you die about your beliefs. That you think's right and that you think's right. There's always going to be two sides to every issue. And that's how we'll divide you. Okay? And they do it in the public schools, right? They beat these ideals into us, right? That's why public schools even came to exist, was because they needed a mechanism to get the beliefs in the people, right? Who started the public school system? Anybody know?
The Pilgrims. Pilgrims started it.
Well,
with the reading of the Bible.
Well, not that. That's
Yeah,
not public school.
I know that.
Okay. We're talking about when we had the one-room schoolhouse that taught all the topics to all the grades into the public school system we know today. There's a group of people called the circuit riders. Okay? And the circuit riders were a group of professors that was paid by John D. Rockefeller to go around in the South, to the cities, and to espouse the public school system, right? And they said, this is great. Public school, you can get property tax to pay for the public school. And that's basically where public school started. And Woodrow Wilson, in 1908, he gave a speech. And the reason I know all this is because I wanted to understand where I was sending my children to, right? What was the public school? What were its goals? And Woodrow Wilson tells us what the public school's goals were in a speech to the New York Teachers Association in 1908. And Woodrow Wilson said, he goes, we only have a limited amount of time. He said, we can't teach everybody. There's not enough time. So what we're going to do is we're going to take very few people and we're going to educate them. And the majority of the people, we're going to educate them enough to pull a lever. And that's what they did. And that's what America is now. Who do you go to if you have a question? You go to the experts, right? Where do the experts come from? Only a handful of schools. Harvard, Yale, Princeton. You don't have to brainwash a whole nation. You don't have to manipulate a whole nation. You have to manipulate 3 or 4 colleges. And everybody else in the country are going to go to those college graduates because they're the experts. They know what's right. And that's where you are today. Look, see an expert in any field you want, I guarantee you. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Oxford. So, all right, guys.
Have any stories from Michigan?
There's all kinds of stories from Michigan. Not that I know. Well, Catherine Henry, a constitutional lawyer, she moved down from Michigan recently to Ormond Beach, Florida, and she's had a problem with local government there. We're actually going to her house on Monday to help her fight against local government. They're trying to say that some stuff on her property is not allowed to be there. So, but she was big up there for like the masks and stuff like that. She fought against the governor during COVID about all that stuff.
Whitler?
Yeah, the lady that was insane. Yeah, she was really insane. Now, I was in Indiana right at the start of COVID. My wife's family is from Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we were up there during the start of COVID. And I was going out filming in Indiana and Ohio, but I wasn't going to go up to Michigan because they had, I was like $10,000 fine if you were caught outdoors. During the COVID at the beginning of it, it was pretty strict. And even Indiana, like even some of the cops in Indiana tried it, but I had the governor's order, which exempted news personnel, so I skated by. But I mean, look, when you're going up against government and they want to take you, there's nothing you're going to do. There's absolutely nothing you're going to do. They'll make up charges. They'll plant evidence. Yep. You guys heard about Zachary Webster in the Panhandle, right? The cop that got busted planting evidence on 120 different people. 120 different people planting evidence. I did a story about a cop in Dothan, Alabama. This guy had so much drugs in his police car, over 3 years worth of cases. He had drugs in his glove box. He had drugs in the doors. He had drugs under the car seats. He had drugs in the trunk. We're talking pounds of weed, cocaine, guns, right? I got all the reports too, which is funny because he took a lie detector test. He doesn't do drugs, okay? And he doesn't sell drugs. So what does he do with those drugs? He plants them. That's what he does. So, yeah. He's now a private detective up in Dothan. They caught him. They actually caught him. They brought him in. They searched his car. That's how they found out about all those drugs in his car. I mean, literally 3 years worth of cases of drugs in this guy's car. How do you feel you're going to get away with that? You feel you're going to get away with it because no one questions, no one watches. So.
Michigan, they got the battery factory they're putting in Big Rapids, and it's Chinese, and the contract is they gotta bring in Chinese nationals to work it. And then, and I mean, these people, they're just now protesting it. And then there's another place in Marshall, Michigan, that's another Chinese, and they've already plowed the land, ready to put in something Chinese. They've been doing that years.
Oh yeah, they're doing it with the farmland. They're doing it with the farmland. China's buying up a lot of farmland too.
And what about the charges against Trump?
Oh. Yeah. I mean, we could go on talking all night, but they said it's time to wrap up, so I'm going to let you guys go. Thanks, guys. Enjoy being here. And enjoy talking to folks. Thank you.
Thanks for getting Jordan. And get Lisa. Lisa's still here.